1500 प्रीलोडेड गानों वाला कीपैड फोन धमाकेदार साउंड के साथ कारवा मोबाइल.
Hi, I'm Utkarsh Patel, and I'll be taking you through stories from mythology. This will be both Indian and world mythology. Some of them you might have heard, some of them you might not have heard. What I intend to do is not only tell its stories, at times even bring in the relevance of the story or maybe the genesis of the story. Kahan se aaya, kyun aaya, why is this story so common, why is this story not so common? So that is what I intend to do. And let's start with the first one today, which is an interesting story with a slight twist to its tale. Thoda sa change hai towards the end. As we move forward, we'll find that this is a story of Rishi Rishya Shringa. Let's understand that further. And it's a myth of a rishi who was the son of sage Vibhandak and Apsara Urvashi. Once Urvashi was sent by Lord Indra to seduce sage Vibhandak and disturb his penance. One thing we must understand that penances by rishis was always a matter of great concern for the gods, for the simple reason is that if these penances went very strong, then they have to be rewarded. And that is exactly why the sages or the gods, preferably the gods, would be very, very worried. Coming back to the story. Sage Vibhandak's penance became so disturbing for Indra that he sent Urvashi out there, and Urvashi did manage to seduce the sage, and from the union gave birth to a child. However, this child had a horn on his head. Of course, there's another version which says that the child was born out of the union of a doe, a female deer, and out of the what we call is the life-giving fluid of the sage. The child was thus named Rishya Shringa, Rishi for the sage and Shringa for the horn of the deer. Sometimes he is even referred to as Ekashringa, implying that he had one horn. However, soon after giving birth to the child, Urvashi decided to retreat to the heavens, her task accomplished. This left Vibhandak in a very, very bitter state of mind. He was very upset and he took a total dislike to the entire women community. And since his penance was disturbed by a woman and he was saddled with a motherless child, he decided to bring up his son in the absence of women. Not only women, he decided to bring up his child in the absence of the entire human beings. So Vibhandak set up his hermitage in the midst of a jungle and started living there with his son, Rishya who was educated on all the scriptures, the Vedas, but he had never had any access or any interaction with a human being, especially women, besides his father. Once there was a famine in the nearby kingdom of Andhra Pradesh, which is the modern-day Bihar, ruled by King Lomapad. The king was advised that there would be rains in his kingdom only if a Brahmin who had observed absolute chastity visited the kingdom, and of course was referred to Rishya Shringa. But he was also aware of the fact that Rishya Shringa had never stepped out of the hermitage. So it was not going to be easy to get him out of his hermitage. The king thought of something and sent beautiful damsels, beautiful girls to fetch Rishya Shringa from the jungle. Rishya Shringa, who had never seen girls, such beautiful girls in his life, was surprised to see them and he just followed them. However, what was important is that sage Vibhandak at that point of time was not in the hermitage, and so Rishya Shringa simply came along with these lovely women. No sooner had he stepped on the grounds of Anga, there was heavy downpour. The king was pleased and so were the subjects. There was rain and everybody was happy. The king then decided to offer his daughter Shanta to the sage as a wife. Later, of course, when Vibhandak came to know about it, he was very angry. But then he made amends with the fact that maybe this was destined to happen and there cannot be any completion without the principle of male and female forces coming together. And so he simply made amends with it. Rishya Shringa and Shanta got married and stayed on at Anga till it was time for their Vanaprastha, retirement to the jungles. King Dashrath of Ayodhya was a friend of King Lomapad. and was without any heir. In spite of having 3 wives, Dashrath of Ayodhya had no children. So when King Dashrath was advised to perform the Putra Kameshti Yagya, that is for the wish of a child, it was decided that he would invite sage Rishyashringa to perform this yagna. It was after this yagna that King Dashrath was blessed with his 4 sons, that is Ram, Lakshman, Bharat and Shatrughna. Now I said at the very beginning that there was a twist to the tale. So if you're wondering where is the twist, here comes the twist. The daughter of King Lomapad, that is Shanta, was actually the daughter of King Dashrath. It is said that Dashrath and Kaushalya, the first wife of King Dashrath, that is Lord Ram's mother, had a daughter who was born with a defect in her legs. The medics of the times could do nothing about it till sage Vasisht suggested that this daughter be donated, Kanyadan as we call it, and given away in adoption to some divine couple. None other than King Lomapad, and Shanta was given to King Lomapad, and surprisingly she was also cured of this handicap, and this was the same daughter who was later married to Rishyashringa. So the twist is that this is the same child who was actually Lord Ram's sister, which we don't hear about much, but then Lord Ram did have a sister. As we move on, there is another relation here. Some versions do not mention of the handicap, but some versions do mention about it. The queen of Anga, that is Shanta's mother, was known as Varshini. Who is Varshini? Varshini was the elder sister of Kaushalya. Once in Ayodhya, when Varshini was visiting Kaushalya and she didn't have any offspring, in jest, King Dashrath had promised that if I ever have a child, I will give it to you. So here is another relationship that we find why the child was given in adoption to the king of Anga and his wife Varshini. So according to this version, Shanta, there's another version here about the rains. So you see, the same story will have a number of versions. Some aspects will have different versions, the story itself will have a different version. There is a different version about why the kingdom was suffering from a famine. Let's understand that version also. According to this version, once when Shanta and King Lomapad, their adoptive father, were busy talking, a Brahmin approached the king for some help for the forthcoming monsoon. The king was too busy to speak to him, which infuriated the Brahmin. He was so angry, he left the place. This further angered Lord Indra, who decided to withhold the rains. And that is why there was also famine. So you see, there were different reasons for the famine, there were different reasons for the adoption of Shanta. There can be a number of reasons that we see this story, that it was the same person who was later invited to do the Putra Kameshti Yagya. And as we see that there is a handicap issue also, but we won't get into all those things as far as the story is concerned. There is another angle here which is very interesting, and that is that later on it is said that Rishyashringa took samadhi in a particular shivling, and this shivling in the town of Kriga, that is near Sringeri. This is in modern Karnataka, India, and the word Sringeri also is derived from the Rishi Rishyashringa. There is a shivling in the temple which is supposed to be the ling which was worshipped by sage Vibhandak. And later Rishi Rishyashringa himself, after living his entire life, it is said that he is supposed to have kind of got merged with that particular shivling. And this shivling, if you see, if you go to this temple, you will find that this shivling has a face, and this shivling also has a small horn on the top of the linga. This is the story of Shanta and Rishi Rishyashringa. Hi, this is Utkarsh Patel, and I'll be taking you through a journey of mythology. There are many stories in Ramayana which we know, and there are many lesser known stories in Ramayana. Similarly, we have many characters who are well known, for example, Jatayu, and there are some which are lesser known characters. Today we'll talk of one such lesser known character, and the name is Sampati. Sampati was a vulture, a relatively unknown character. However, His younger brother Jatayu is better known for making efforts to save Sita while she was being abducted by Ravan. But let's begin the story from the very beginning. Sampati and Jatayu were the mortal sons of Aruna, who was the brother of the famous Garud, the mount of Lord Vishnu. Aruna was the charioteer of sun god. The pedigree made them special birds with large wingspans and the ability to soar high in the skies. Once the two of them decided to fly a race in the skies. As the race began, youth took over, and without realizing, they flew higher and higher. Soon they were reaching very close to the sun. When Sun saw two specks closing in towards him, he turned his stare towards them. Sampati knew that they had flown too close and tried to dissuade Jatayu to turn back and give up the race. But the young Jatayu was soaring high. Seeing the sun turn his glare towards them, in a moment, Sampati soared higher than Jatayu and covered him with his wingspan. The sun's glare fell on Sampati, which burnt his wings, and soon he was heading towards the earth, as he had no wings left. Jatayu realized it, but all too late, and he too followed his brother. In trying to save his brother, of course, Sampati lost his wings. Jatayu was now concerned about his brother's ability to hunt and feed himself since he had no wings left. At this, Sampati is supposed to have said that since he won't be able to hunt live animals anymore, he would henceforth have to feed on dead ones. To this, Jatayu also vowed that since Sampati had lost his wings trying to save him, he too would feed on dead animals only. It is said that since then, the vultures feed on dead animals, unlike other birds of prey who feed on live animals. But coming back to the epic of the story, Ramayana, epic makes a fleeting appearance in the epic, unlike the heroic death of his brother Jatayu. Before dying, Jatayu is supposed to have informed Ram that he did see Sita being kidnapped by someone in a flying chariot. Soon Ram sent a team of Vanars to find Sita. The team, comprising of Hanuman, Jamvan, Angad, amongst others, had reached the southern end of the land, near the seashore, from where no land could be seen. The team was disappointed, and they had become lifeless, and they nearly collapsed near the shore. Sampati was watching them from a distance and was happy and joyous, and said that there was food for him, and God had been kind to send him a dying army of monkeys to feast on. Hearing this, Jamvan remarked that life was so ironical. One vulture, Jatayu, gives up his life saving Sita, and here is another one trying to feast on the same set of people who are out to seek Sita. The name Jatayu made Sampati approach Jamvan and asked him to tell him more about him. All were surprised at this sudden change. Jamvan related the whole story of Jatayu, how he had died trying to save Sita while she was being kidnapped. Sampati was both proud and sad. Proud to know that his brother had tried to save someone being kidnapped, and sad to hear that he was no more. Sampati then introduced himself and promised to help them. Sampati then told them that few days back he had seen the Asura king Ravan take a hapless woman in his chariot across the sea, who must be the Sita they were looking for. Sampati was gifted with vision which could see long distances, and he could see Sita being held captive in the region of Lanka, which was across the sea. With this information, the search team went back with the news to Ram. Both the Vulture brothers contributed to the search of Sita. Jatayu told Ram about Sita being abducted, and Sampati told the team that she was being held captive in Lanka. Why then have the popular renditions completely overlooked Sampati is a question that's not been answered as of now. But what is important is that at least now we know the story of Sampati. In Ramayana, there are many stories and some lesser known stories which many of us have not heard. Today I'll tell you one lesser known story from Ramayana as mentioned in Tulsidasa's Ramcharitmanas. Kak Busundi, or sometimes also called Kaka Busundi, is considered to be a great devotee of Ram. And in Uttarakhand of the epic, Ramayana, it's found narrating the story of Ram to Garud, who is the Vahan of Vishnu. After listening to the story, Garuda was intrigued about the devotion and the knowledge residing in the body of a small crow, and he wanted to know more. It was then that Kakbusundi revealed his own story and told him how he became a crow. Let us listen to that. Busundi was born a human being in the kingdom of Ayodhya. He was a great devotee of Shiva, and at the same time, he was quite arrogant. He refused to worship any other god or deity. Rather, he looked down upon people who did so. Once he met a saint who was charmed by the intelligence of Busundi and accepted him as his disciple. While the saint too was a devotee of Shiva, he had immense respect for Ram too. Over time, as Busundi's hatred towards the devotees of Ram grew, the saint was visibly worried. He even noticed that Busundi had begun to insult the people who would worship Ram. The saint tried to reason with him. He explained to Busundi benefits of worshipping Shiva would only lead him to the feet of Ram. But this angered Busundi so much that at times he would yell even at his guru. The saint never took offense, as he felt that Busundi was otherwise a good disciple. One day, Busundi was worshipping at the temple of Shiva. The belief that Ram was an inferior god had been firmly entrenched in the mind of his. Busundi was doing his jap when his guru entered the temple. But Busundi decided to ignore the guru and went on doing his jap. Seeing this insult to the guru, Shiva was angered. His voice could be heard in the temple when he cursed Busundi that he would change into a snake and live in the hollows of a tree for showing disrespect to his guru. When the guru heard Shiva's curse, he was worried, and he immediately sang a hymn in praise of the Lord, Namami Samishana Nirvana Rupam, which is mentioned in Uttarakhand, which seemed to placate Shiva a bit. Shiva offered him a boon, and the guru asked that he may be known as somebody who is devoted to Shiv. But would he please offer him another boon? When Shiva agreed, he pleaded on behalf of his disciple, requesting that he be pardoned. Shiva said that since he had already uttered the words, he could not take it back. However, he would ensure that the curse in a way became a blessing for him. He would have to take 1,000 such births till he assumed the form of a human. However, each birth would be like changing clothes for him. He would not have to undergo the agony of birth and death and would seamlessly assume forms, and while at it, he would even retain the knowledge of his previous births. Also, since he was born in Ayodhya, he would end up being a great devotee of Lord Ram. Soon, he changed about 1,000 forms, and the end of it, he was born in the house of a Brahmin family. Busundi now became a great devotee of Ram, and while he was growing up, he would not want to listen to any other gods or deities. His father would try his best to inculcate in him the devotion of other gods, but Busundi would not even want to listen to anything. Soon he grew up and he went for his learning from hermitage to hermitage, ashram to ashram, from one teacher to another. Busundi ended up at the ashram of sage Lomasa, who was renowned for his knowledge of religion and philosophy. Once, after telling him stories of Ram, the sage explained the concept of the formless supreme being, the concept of Brahman, as he felt that Busundi was now ready for it. But Busundi was not interested in anything else and requested the sage that he wanted to know only about Ram and none else. Sage Lomasa tried to explain the need for acknowledging the concept of a formless and an attribute of supreme being. But Busundi was not willing to listen. This led to an argument, and the sage cursed him that he would turn into a crow for being so stubborn and not willing to listen to anything and repeating only his point of view, as this was how crows behaved. When Ram came to know that his devotee had now been cursed, he approached the sage and urged him to take it back. Sage Lomasa called Busundi back and blessed him for being the chosen one, and recited the entire Ramcharitmanas, and was finally blessed as one of the most ardent devotees of Lord Ram. Busundi was overjoyed and continued to sing the praise of Lord Ram, and thus ended the story of the devoted crow, Busundi. Today I am going to tell you a story from the epic Ramayana, and we'll be talking about a relatively lesser known character. Though she's not quite lesser known, but she's not so well known in the sense that she has a lot of negative shades attached to her. I'm talking about Kaikeyi. But let us understand why Kaikeyi was the way she was according to this particular folktale. An interesting folktale explains the way she was, and this story is also titled as Kaikeyi the Shrew. According to this folktale, once in the city of Saurashtra, there lived a Brahmin and his wife, whose name was Kalaha. She would never listen to her husband, no matter what he asked her to do. Her husband was tired of this insubordination and spoke to a friend about his dilemma. His friend suggested that he ask her to do the opposite of whatever he wanted done and see if that made any difference. It worked, and the husband soon grew to be a master of saying what he did not mean. "Never invite my friend for a dinner. He is a scoundrel," he once announced. Sure enough, the friend was invited home for dinner. This continued, and the couple seemed to have found a peaceful solution. Soon it was the season of Shraddh, and the Brahmin wanted to perform the ceremony of his father. He told his wife that he did not plan to observe the ritual. True to the form, his wife not only pulled him up for being a bad son, but she made sure that the ritual would be performed without delay. "Don't put up a feast and don't invite too many Brahmins," the husband said, and he got his way, just as he knew he would. However, the Brahmin slipped up at some point during the ceremony, and by mistake he told his wife that the pindas were to be immersed in holy waters. Kalaha went and threw them down the drain. But the quick thinking Brahmin immediately instructed her not to fish out the pindas and never to immerse them in holy waters. Once again he got his way. A time came when the Brahmin was tired of the charade and contemplated leaving her for another wife. When she found out, the wife committed suicide, but her afterlife was also miserable. After the gods tallied up her life's course, they found she had indeed been a despicable person, and it was deemed that Kalaha would be reborn as Kaikeyi and undergo redemption under none other than Narayan himself. This is the story of Kaikeyi in her past life. Towards the end of the epic, she apologizes to Ram for her conduct, which she blames on her ignorance. To this, Ram is supposed to have said, "You are not guilty of your actions. It was under my command that goddess Saraswati, the goddess of speech, sat on your tongue as you asked for my exile. You are pure, and I am not angry with you at all." Some versions also say that she did all this under the instructions of Ram himself. According to this version, Ram once confessed to Kaikeyi that he was Lord Vishnu on earth, and he needed to go to the forests to eliminate many a demon and Ravan as part of his duty on earth. For this, could she do something to help him? He also warned her of the implications and the stigma that would be associated to her name for ages. Kaikeyi could not have said a no, as she was an ardent devotee of Lord Vishnu, and a stigma on her name was a relatively small sacrifice to be made to get to serve the Lord himself. It is said that after her death, Kaikeyi found a place at Vaikunth, the abode of Lord Vishnu. Here is an interesting story which kind of absolves Kaikeyi of all the negative that is surrounded around her. This and many more such stories I'll be telling you regularly. Till then, let me listen to my favorite song on my Saregama Karwa.